out to the campaign trail. The first Republican debate is 48 hours away. And former President Trump says he will not be on the stage in Milwaukee. Wednesday's debate comes as several new polls show his lead in the GOP primary is as strong, if not stronger than ever. In Iowa, a new Des Moines Register NBC News poll shows Trump with 42%. That's more than double DeSantis at 19%. The largest margin for a frontrunner at this stage since George W. Bush in 2000. Nationally, polls also show him with an increasing lead. Obviously, we have seen his poll numbers increase with each indictment. A new CBS poll shows 73% of GOP voters say legal fights are a reason for supporting him. The panel is with us now. Chris Steyerwalt, who will be in Milwaukee. Does it make, I guess I should say this is not as a question, as a statement. It is unquestionably true that without Trump, it is less exciting.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I think it will be less of a draw, right? There will be fewer eyeballs on the debate. But I'm very interested to see what happens up there and how these folks sort themselves out. You know, 2/3 of respondents in a recent poll that Firehouse Strategies commissioned said they thought Trump should debate. The Republican Party wants Trump to debate. It's pretty clear. But without him, they're going to have to wrestle with each other and figure out, you know, who's running for which kind of voters and how are they going to interact with each other. So for me, a nerd, I will find it extraordinarily interesting, even if there isn't the same kiloton power in ratings as there would have been with Mr. MAGA on stage.
All right, so Denise, who do we look to make both the case against Donald Trump, and we keep seeing and hearing that Ron DeSantis is going to try to make the case for Trump's policies without Donald Trump. Does anybody want the lukewarm version in the Republican Party of Donald Trump?
I don't think anyone wants the lukewarm version of anybody. I mean, you come to play leader of the free world, you come to play hard, and if you're not, you should go home. You know, I think, and that's probably some advice to Mike Pence and others like him, but I would say that I don't think that trying to out-Trump Trump ever wins. I think that we saw that with Marco Rubio in 2016. When you get mean and you get in the dirt with Trump, you end up losing because nobody can do it better than him. So I think that you're going to see people like Tim Scott really step out and take a stage because we want someone ultimately who's not just a fighter, but someone who has a vision for America that's forward-thinking.
All right. So speaking of Tim Scott, who has sort of eschewed any type of real television interaction or interviews in long-form interviews, certainly he's done a gaggle or two at the Iowa State Fair and has been unrelentingly positive about you. Can you beat Donald Trump by not running against him? Does that work?
I don't really understand people calling these other people Trump Lite. I mean, Trump represents to his base an economic platform, period. And none of these people are picking up on that piece of it. I don't know what he represents to the people running against him because none of them have an economic platform that is speaking to his voters, to working class voters. To them, President Trump represents, you know, a trade war with China, undoing NAFTA, immigration reform, all of the things that impact working class voters on an economic level. And nobody is talking to any of these issues. That's why he has no competition.
Well, maybe they're talking about those issues, but we're not hearing them. No one's listening because Donald Trump just fills up the room. I think the Republican candidates, they're all looking for that moment. It'll be interesting to see whether DeSantis can perform at a level where he distinguishes himself because his numbers are falling while Vivek's are rising. Who's going to have that moment? But I can guarantee you one thing. Whatever moment they have, it won't be as big a moment because Donald Trump won't be there.
Right. If you were having to watch the split screen of Donald Trump responding to that moment, it changes things.
And the other thing I'll be looking for is whether, I haven't seen polling on this. If Donald Trump's out of the race, I always say he's not going to stay in the race because of his legal issues. But if he's out of the race, where do those MAGA voters go? Where's the polling on that? Because they've got lots of
secondary. I think it's Vivek and DeSantis.
There's no way to do the polling because you're asking people to imagine what they cannot imagine right now. And that's part of why Trump not participating in this debate is a mistake.
Right.
It is not good for the front runner to start letting the Republican Party to imagine itself without him. He has said that he will not participate in any debates. I'm not going to do any debates. That won't fly. That doesn't work. And I will tell you one last thing, which is that you can see in the Des Moines Register poll and you can see in new polls out from Echelon Insights today that there is fluidity under the crust,
Yes.
right? The molten core is not set yet, right? There's still magma bubbling away down under there. And Trump cannot afford to take these people for granted because we know about Iowa particularly. The electorate is dynamic, the caucuses are weird, and something will happen.
Trump is the party, though. He's still the party.
Okay. Thanks for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to subscribe. Click the red button to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.